Okay, so this is a Scratch project that should look pretty familiar. So we have a reset block, which is usually the first thing that I do. Actually, the first thing I do is create some kind of a sprite. So here I've got this sprite. It's a button. Um, when we start out, we go to X, Y, 0, and 0. We point in a given direction. We set the size to 10%. And then I enable the pen blocks and I erase everything on the screen in case there's anything, put the pen down, and then set the pen size. So those are the standard things. Now, what you can do in my blocks is you can grab this block out and attach it here. You can also double click the block anytime you want to just reset everything. Anytime you double click it here, whatever's on your screen will go away and it'll reset it. So you can execute any block directly by double clicking on it. So the next thing is if I wanted to create a square, um, what I could do is make a block and I'll just choose. Now I'm going to encourage you to start using variable names that are similar to variable names that you would use in C, just because I think it's good practice. Generally, this is a block. So a block is like a function. It's something that the computer does, something that Scratch does. And so notice that it's always lowercase. Variables are lowercase, blocks are lowercase. But if there's more than one word, we capitalize this here. So draw square, draw triangle. Generally in programming, multiple word variable names and function names are separated either by an underscore or by a capital letter. In this case, this is called camel case. Camel case is lowercase beginning and then uppercase every subsequent word. Apple uses camel case all the time. So iPhone, iPad, iOS, that's all lowercase beginning, right? So that's camel case. So I'm going to say draw square, and we're going to add an input number. Now, last time I showed you this, I messed up. I should have renamed this. We want to give this a variable name that actually makes sense. So I'm going to say size. And the larger that number is, the bigger the square is going to be. And so I'm going to hit OK. And you'll notice that it pops in the define block with draw square that says size. And so if we just put in the control, notice that a square has 4 sides. We're going to say 4 sides. And for the motion, let's say we'll move some number of steps. And then we're going to turn, in this case, 90 degrees. So this size we can drag over here. So now notice what I just did is I took this. This is called a parameter variable. This variable holds any number. So when I actually call square, if I send in square and say 50, this number 50 is now held in this variable size. And so when I say move size steps, it calls back to what number was passed in when draw square was called. And so you'll notice that it draws 50. If I make this 150 and then run it again, it should clear it out and it should draw a larger square. So what I've just done is I've passed a parameter in to this square function, which makes it a lot more useful because now I can use it to draw squares of different sizes. Okay, so that's really helpful. Now, one thing that is kind of cool is to say, well, if I draw this square, what happens if I draw a bunch of squares? I can say, let's say repeat and draw this like say 72 times. And every time I draw a square, I'm going to turn, say, 5 degrees. Yeah, 5 degrees. And then what we were doing earlier is we were saying, just to kind of make things fun, we were going to change the pen color by some amount. And then if I run this, we kind of get it something like this. Now, one of the things that you can do to quickly shortcut stuff is if you go to the edit menu and you choose turn on turbo mode just jumps right to the end. So when you click turbo mode, it just shows you what it'll look like when it's done. So you don't have to wait for the whole thing to go around. So that'll save some time. Now, I think this square probably will fit better on the screen if I make this 75. So I'll just change it there, run it again, and then that's what we get. Okay, so that's pretty cool. But here's the thing, like what would happen if I start thinking about changing this design? What if I wanted to draw a square that's 75, but then I wanted to draw another one that was like 85 and then 95, so that every time it draws a new square, that square is progressively larger. Or maybe we want to start it really small at 5 and then add 5 or 10 each time. What we could do is we could take this whole thing and duplicate it a whole bunch of times and change this to say 75, and then the next time we call it, make it 65, and then 55. Like we could do that. But quickly, what would happen is this would get to be super, super long. if I did that, right? Like I could basically take this, copy and paste it a bunch of times. And then, you know, it's going to get really super long. So these commands are all the same. The only difference is the value that we're passing in to draw a square. So as you may have guessed, this is not a great way to do it. We're going to use what's called a variable. And a variable is simply like a box that holds a value. Technically, a variable actually stores a memory location where at that memory location you have a certain value stored. But for our intents and purposes, we can think of a variable as something that stores information. So we could store a number, we could store text, that kind of thing. Let's go ahead and make a variable. And we're going to make a new variable here, and we're going to call it side. So this is going to be like the length of each side of the square. And so now in our reset, what we're going to do is we're going to set side where we have to initialize it. So we have to give it some initial value. Let's say we want our squares to start off really small, like 3. Okay. And so we've now declared our variable here. We've initialized it to 3. We're going to draw this, but instead of saying draw 75, we're going to draw 3 the first time. And then after it draws this one square, it's going to draw the square, then it's going to turn 5, change pen color. One more thing that I want it to do is I want you to change side. I'm going to choose this from the pull-down menu by, say, 5. So the next time it loops back around, it's going to draw it a little bit bigger. It's going to draw it square 8, and then square 13, and then square, like it's going to go up. So let's give that a try. Oh, whoops. Kind of took the suspense out of it when I did the turbo mode. So I'll turn off turbo mode. So that's kind of neat, right? So it's kind of increasing a little bit. So what we've done, which is pretty significant here, very cool, is we've actually created a variable. And a variable is used here, and the variable is incremented each time through the loop. And that's how you can make these designs that kind of grow. So think about how you might use variables. What if you created a variable called angle and started it at 5 degrees, but then turned it just a little bit more each time? How would that change the way that it looked? You could do that. You could create a variable called angle the same way that I did, right? And then just make sure you change angle. So think about doing some different kinds of things with variables as you finish up your kaleidoscopes.